I'm about as real as they come.
All my beats tailored by Joe. House Digital.
Maserati, Rick in Detroit. Convertible bird in Miami. Graduated summa cum laude. Strip club made a tsunami. Carlton Hines with the ball game. Grateful Edmonds with the snowflakes. Craig Pettis in the M-Town. Sal Magluta with the boat game. Falcone with the cocaine. Like Freeway Ricky with the plug game. Like Monster Cody in South Central. Larry Davis from close range. Yo, we back. It's your boy Popalot. Mobb ties. We on our way to DC with it. Southwest. K Street to be exact. All my niggas from DC, y'all get in the comment box, let it be known. Y'all know how we rockin'. Now, today we gonna be covering none other than the notorious K Street crew and a little bit about the K Street crew. They were a marijuana dealing organization in the District of Columbia from the late 80s to 1998 when they were indicted and convicted on racketeering charges. We're going to talk a little bit about them, but not only were they a marijuana dealing organization, they were an organization that was dealing in death, murder, and mayhem. And these are quotes from the government, from news and media outlets. They were actually convicted of murdering 11 people. Melody Anderson, Anthony Fortune, Alonzo Gaskins, Christiana Gladden, Maurice Hallman, Leonard Hyson, Tarita Lucas, Darnell Mack, Teresa Thomas, Darnell Whitfield, and Larry Wright. So we're going to talk a little bit about those murders, but one thing that stood out to me about the crew, and actually the group that was indicted was a 5-member gang, and it was gonna, from what I read, who started and who was, I guess, who groomed the gang was a guy by the name of Vincent Vito Hall. Another guy that was indicted and was like, I would say almost like the gang enforcer, because he was charged, looks like, with like 9 of those 11 murders, was a guy by the name of Samuel Chin Carson. Another guy that was in the indictment is going to be William Draper Sweetney, also Jerome Pimp Martin Jr., and Sean Coates, aka Birdie. Now, according to documents from their trial, they say that the story began with the criminal actions of Vincent Vito Hill, where people testified at trial that they grew up learning to sell drugs from Hill beginning as early as age 11 to 14. One of the cooperating witnesses described it as a big brother, little brother relationship, where he would beat up others at age 11, get congratulated by Vito, and then be promoted to the role of lookout, where he could protect Vito Hill's drug activity, and eventually graduating into dealing drugs with the other guys that was associated with the K Street crew. Now, Hill would sell drugs in Southwest DC and have other individuals sell drugs for him, providing binoculars, walkie-talkies, so that his underlings could warn him if police were approaching. Now, according to the government, by the 1990s, the K Street crew began to sell marijuana collectively in and around the 200 block of K Street Southwest, which continued up until 1998. Now, over time, the K Street dealers developed an increasingly large and loose organized drug selling network. Now, for example, one seller described it, the group would go in sequence, with each seller taking a turn serving the next buyer that would come up. So if a buyer, and this is on another note, they said, so if a buyer was to pull off with somebody's bag without paying, the dealers would yell down the street, and before the car could get out the area, somebody would throw a brick, a bottle, stop the car, or even if somebody had a gun at night, they said that they would even shoot at the car. Now, the K Street dealers sold marijuana in and around K Street throughout the morning, afternoon, and evening During 1994 and 1995, Hill made the most money out of the group, taking approximately $200 to $1,000 a day selling weed. By 1996, Hill made roughly $3,000 to $4,000 in illicit profits each week, while the other members of the gang, Coates, Martin, Sweetney, they made a little less. And in addition to dealing marijuana, the other members, Carson and Sweetney, would help supply other members that was dealing. And they surrounded pretty much the area with a culture of violence, intimidation, and according to the government, that violence grew each year that the gang was in operation. And they're going to say it started with the murder of a guy by the name of Larry Wright, a victim of a drug dealing turf war. A local drug dealer by the name of Andre Murray testified that he and Tyrone Bronner sold drugs together at First and P Street Southwest, while Vito, along with Wayne Perry, sold drugs in another part of K Street, in another part of the K Street neighborhood. So yeah, that's right, y'all heard it. Wayne Perry kind of was like in the groundworks, working with this organization. Now, in the beginning of the summer of 1989, Mary testified that Wright was released from prison and resumed dealing drugs, but did so on what Mary and Hill viewed as the wrong side of K Street. So a short time later, on the evening of June 29th, 1989, Mary heard gunshots fired and saw Hill at the corner of First and O Street Southwest running away, and Larry Wright ended up being murdered on that night. Now, several murders followed that one. In late 1989, Carson, along with another K Street dealer who cooperated with the government, James Montgomery, murdered a guy by the name of Maurice Hallman in revenge for a previous fight. And according to testimony from Montgomery, while Montgomery was hustling on Delaware Avenue Southwest, Hallman punched him, at first in a playful manner, and then in an effort to try to show off for Vito. Montgomery asked Hallman to stop. When he didn't, Montgomery put his stash down and pretty much came back and gave him a body shot. Hallman got mad, according to the testimony from Montgomery, he then slapped Montgomery on the head pretty much with a gun. That altercation prompted Montgomery to tell Hallman in front of several witnesses that he was going to kill him. Now, Carson pretty much almost scolded Montgomery for threatening Hallman in front of other people and suggested that if something happened to Hallman, that Montgomery was going to be the first person that police was going to come get. So Montgomery then apologized to Hallman in front of everybody, so everybody think like, oh yeah, nah, shit that made up, that shit was just some bullshit. Now, that apology didn't go far, because they're going to say Montgomery killed Hallman on December 19th, 1989. According to his own testimony, Montgomery was in the possession of Hallman's gun and used it to lure him to an alley. So that pretty much sums up that murder. Now, going into 1990, is going to be a guy, or actually at that time it's going to be a child by the name of Norman Yusuf Simmons. He was only 15 years old. He was kidnapped by Coates and several other individuals on April 28th of 1990. Simmons was riding a bike in a park when two individuals approached him with semi-automatics. They forced Simmons into a car, drove him to a mall, then eventually took him to an apartment complex. Simmons was placed in the trunk, then into a second car. He was then driven to an apartment and he was asked at gunpoint for contact information for his family, and then he was put into a closet. Eventually, they took him to a wooded area and bound him with black electrical tape. Thereafter, they brought him to a parking lot, so it's just a whole bunch of like back and forth. They just taking a nigga and shit. And then they pretty much released him, letting him know that his family had paid them a ransom. Moving on to 1991, and Chen Carson, who was going to be like, I want to say the most dangerous member of the organization, pretty much. If Vito was the money getter, Carson was the trigger puller. They're going to say Chen stored a AK-47 along with other guns at the home of Teresa Thomas, with whom he was in a romantic relationship with. She was 17 years old at the time. Teresa, she lived with two infant daughters and her 18-year-old sister, Tarita Lucas, and another woman by the name of Crystal Babbitt. Now, Carson asked Thomas to return the AK-47s, but according to testimony from Montgomery, Thomas kept giving Carson excuses about the gun. Another one of the defendants, Martin, accused Carson of going soft over a broad and suggested that Thomas was going to end up letting Carson get killed with his own gun, because one of the fathers of Thomas's daughter was a guy from 5th and O Street, and apparently Martin had some concerns that that man would take Carson's gun from Thomas's house and use it against him. So Carson pretty much told Babbitt that he did not trust the man having a gun on him, and he had to stay strapped when he was visiting. So Babbitt saw about 5 guns that Chen had stored under his chick's under her bed or whatever. So on March 22nd of 1991, Babbitt returned to the apartment after having spent the previous night with her family in Maryland. Now, when she entered the apartment, she saw what appeared that, or what she thought was juice all spread around the room, and then she soon discovered that it was blood. And she found Thomas dead, with Thomas's daughter still alive under Thomas's body. She ran to seek help. Police officers arrived. They found Thomas and Lucas dead, with all 3 children alive in the apartment, and there was no signs of forced entry. And any pictures that were in the apartment of Carson had been removed from the apartment. According to Montgomery's testimony, Carson initially denied being responsible for the double murder, but later on he went on to describe to Montgomery what happened. Carson said that he went to her apartment asking her about the gun, and Thomas kept on saying that she'll get the gun for him, but she couldn't get it right at the time because it was behind a lot of stuff at her house, and she didn't really want to wake her kids up. So Carson gonna say Thomas kept giving him excuses, so he went to the bathroom and came out and he shot her in the head. After that, he walked into her sister's bedroom and he shot her. He pretty much said, as she was lifting up before she opened her eyes, he said he shot her in the head and she just laid back down. He ended up fleeing to a waiting vehicle that was driven by a guy by the name of Clifton Edwards. Carson also shot and killed a guy by the name of Anthony Fortune in August of 1991 after a dispute between Martin, Carson, and Fortune in a dice game. Carson described the killing to Montgomery, recalling that he had shot Fortune. After Fortune fell, Carson went over the top and hit him some more. So it's like he pretty much executed his ass. A witness saw Martin and Carson earlier and heard Martin talking about how he didn't like Fortune robbing people, and how he was so grimy that he would even kill your mother. And later that evening, witnesses saw Carson walking towards Tony Fortune, shooting. Carson then stood over the top of him, the witnesses pretty much testified, and continued to shoot him. Now, a guy by the name of Chris Bachman, who was a friend or associate of Martin and Carson, was murdered on September the 3rd, 1991. Martin and Carson, along with others, believed that that killing was a retaliation for the murder of Fortune. And Martin and Montgomery and others engaged in like a few attempts to try to get some get back for that killing. And they ended up like in some tit for tat shootouts. One was with a white minivan, and that They ended up firing on that minivan. That minivan sped off. But on September 10th of 1991, the next attempt to seek revenge ended up with a shootout with Maryland police. The group found two people that they was looking for, but the two people that they saw started to run, and the vehicle pretty much pursued them. But they was not able to catch up with them. Not being able to catch up with those targets, they ended up leaving the scene. Upon leaving the scene, they determined that a car passed by the group in the van and began to shoot at them. But according to testimony from Montgomery, they saw shots coming from them from another direction also. Somebody that looked like a security guard was shooting at the van. And that security guard was one of four Maryland police officers who witnessed the shootout and started to return fire on the van. Police found the van abandoned on the 1300 block of 45th Place Southeast. It was riddled with bullet holes. A DC driver permit issued to Jerome Martell apparently belonged to Jerome Martin. It was found on the driver's side door. Police found 6 sets of fingerprints in the van, 3 of which match the known fingerprints of Montgomery, Martin, and Carson.